here with a couple personal trainers at Parkway Athletic Club who actually specialize in running. Fitz, we call him. Fitz comes from more of the marathon side of this, and he's got an incredible testimony about how he's reshaped his body. And Tegan is a collegiate runner, runs different distances, cross country, and so on. So Fitz is the director of fitness at Parkway Athletic Club, and Tegan is a trainer there at Parkway Athletic Club in Reno, Nevada. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Yeah, of course, Steve. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so I'm curious because I ran for football, and I was okay. Like my best mile time in college, which was about, 300 years ago, was like 5 minutes, 20 seconds. So I wasn't really a distance guy, but you guys both run different distances. And what if I want to really get into people that want to incorporate running into their exercise program, and maybe they've never done it. So maybe you could both give me kind of your input on how, because you guys started in a different way. Tegan, you've been running since you were 5, probably.
Yeah, close to it.
And so Fitz, you kind of made this a lifestyle. So why don't you guys just tell me how you got started?
Yeah, for sure. Tegan, if you want to start as you were kind of born into running there.
Yeah, sure. I started running when I was in 5th grade, I think, or maybe 4th grade. It was a while ago, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was playing like volleyball and basketball in middle school, and I was probably like 4'0" at that time. So not very conducive to being very competitive at either of those sports. You kind of need to be tall for that. So I remember one day I just went out, I talked to my dad. I was like, hey, I'm going to try out for running. And then I showed up at the tryout that next day in like black khakis and a polo t-shirt, and then ran their little mile course that they had set up.
You were first timer right out the gate,
First
man.
timer right out the gate. And I ended up running I think it was like a 7:46 or something. And I thought I was like hot shit at that time. So I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. And I guess it worked out for me.
Okay. So Fitz, what's your story?
That's really interesting though, man, because you started off with like different sports and, genetics weren't on your side for that one. So you kind of branched out, tried the running, and you're like, man, maybe there's something to this a little bit. Right. And now you're freaking collegiate runner, running for UNR. So that's really cool, brother. Yeah. For me, a little bit different because I wasn't born into the sport, kind of like Tegan. Those genetics were not on my side. I was, morbidly obese up until about the age of like 22. I'm 29 now. So, the body you see here is not what I'm used to being. This is kind of, the minority of my life here. So I fell into running in my later years. And actually, my very first run was when I was pretty heavy still. I was upwards of, I want to say 260 pounds when I finished my first 5K. And how I fell into it was, I'm sure, in a lot of your local towns, cities, right, you'll have the fun runs, charity runs. You'll see the 5K for cancer or the 10K for the homeless. That's a great way, man, to get started. I recommend picking something close to home. Like for myself, the charity supported pancreatic cancer, which is what I lost my grandfather to. So, was I the fastest? No. Did I have to walk like 90% of it? Yeah. But, we finished. And honestly, for your first 5K, that should be your main goal. Or 5K, 10K, whatever your first distance is not really to beat a certain time, but finish healthy, so that way you want to come back and do another one, right?
All right. That's great advice. So that's the first thing, everyone out there. Finish healthy. If you have to walk 90% of it, great. But so I'm not a runner, but what a 5K is about? What, 3 miles?
Dude, let's get technical. Tegan over there.
It's like 3.11.
Yeah, you knew that. 3.11. Okay, yeah. So that you're running about 3 miles, a little over 3 miles. And so what would be some things, back to you again, Fitz, that would prevent people, if they're starting and they're obese, what would prevent them from not finishing healthy?
Like I said, probably going out of the gun too hot. Now I know, 3.1 miles for a lot of people doesn't sound like a long distance, but if you've never done it before or you're not used to the impact like on your bones, your ligaments, your joints of running, then going out of the gate too hot, and what I mean by too hot is like too fast, can burn a lot of your matches, a lot of your energy early on to where you might hit what's called the wall at mile 2 and you will just have nothing left to give, right? So I would just recommend, especially in your race, kind of pacing yourself. And if you're following a training program, that will kind of be dictated for you on, okay, how fast should I be running these miles? What should, my ballpark projection finish time be? But, there's something to be said about when you go from training to the event. And I mean, even some of these small charity events, you get the nostalgia of the race, the crowds cheering, the music. They usually have a DJ there too, you know what I mean? It's very easy to go out and get too excited and run too fast in the beginning. So I would just recommend everybody, even for the shorter 5Ks, 10Ks, pace yourself and run within yourself. Don't run or don't chase anybody who's blowing by you. Just run your race.
Okay, that's good advice. So Tegan, you've been running all your life, and I know you've been trained by some incredible coaches.
Yeah.
And I was too. When I was in college, I was trained by, his name was Bob Aleo, and he was amazing. And I was fortunate to be trained by someone who was best in the business even at that time. So I know you've had that same situation, but how have you incorporated, because you have a runner's body, how have you incorporated resistance training, or have you incorporated resistance training to help you be a better runner?
Yeah, I think, I've started to hit it a lot more recently. But I think if you're not resistance training as a runner, you're about 20 years behind the curve of the elite endurance athletes out there. Back in, I think it was like the 90s and the early 2000s, there were like the first signs of endurance runners actually doing strength training, and it kind of just took off from there. But one of the great things that it helps with is, one, injury prevention, but it also helps with running mechanics. It greatly increases your running efficiency and power output and production. So being able to incorporate that into your training is like invaluable. It's almost as important as the actual running itself or the recovery behind the running. So I consider it to be like one of the top 3 most important things to do when you're training for running. And it can be at any level either, whether it's like collegiate, elite, or if you're just trying to get in and start your first 5K, you having the strength you get from that strength training is super important.
So tell me a little bit about your rep range because you're training to improve your running. So are you in a 3 rep range per set, or are you doing 30 reps per set? Tell me about your rep range, because I know you're trying to relate this to running. Mm-hmm. So how do you get the benefit of resistance training without, becoming a power lifter? What's your rep range?
Sure. It very much depends on what you're going for. So you really have to optimize your training for your specific goal. For me, I want to be primarily a mile runner. So usually what I'll do is during the base phase, which is kind of like a build-up phase for a season where you're just trying to either build volume or strength, I will go pretty heavy. So focusing specifically on the 1 to 3 rep maxes, or at most, if it's isolation exercises, 4 to 6 reps of fairly high weight, shooting for like 8 on rate of perceived effort scale. And that usually helps build up the strength pretty well. And then as you move into the season, I like to shift over to power production, which is pretty much the same thing as strength production, except you have to do it as quick as you can, because that's the equation for power. And then once you get into the peak phase of training, then you can focus more on neuromuscular adaptation and facilitation. And then you can basically peak, essentially. So those are kind of like the 3 phases I try to break up the training into. But you don't always have to stick to that either. Depending on what you're doing, you could focus on eccentric or isometric work too. One of the great things about isometric training is that it helps with tendon load capacity. So our tendons, not a lot of people realize this, but our tendons actually house about 50% of the power production that we use while we're running or doing anything because of their elasticity. So if we can build up those tendons to work in conjunction with our muscles, then we can just overall more efficiently be able to do things like running. So incorporating all three of those in the training, but mostly focusing on like heavier for strength, some less reps is usually what I'm trying to go for.
That's interesting. I find that interesting. So I would have thought maybe that you were doing more muscular endurance stuff in the gym, but you are going for strength. You said 1 to 3 reps, and you talked about explosiveness, power, which if I still can remember from high school, is the speed times the distance times the weight or something like that. So basically it's something like a power clean or maybe a push press or something. But so you're trying to offset or almost like tease your muscles by doing something that's kind of opposite of what you do when you run. Is that right?
I wouldn't say tease necessarily. I'd say fine tune it. Maybe if I was like focusing on 10K or like half marathons, I would go for more strength endurance, but the mile at the highest level is 4 minutes or below. So, right. You're going to be done with the race before it even starts, essentially. So you don't I would consider the power production aspect of it to be a little bit more important than the muscular endurance behind it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's still some level of muscular endurance, but I think you get a lot of that with the actual running training itself. So you can focus a little bit more on the strength and the power in the gym.
And it's so interesting too, because both of us probably in the gym 5 days a week, but our training protocols vastly differ, because as he said, training for different protocol, different distance, that 5K, 10K, short and nasty, distance. I, on the other hand, I probably won't touch anything under a marathon. I'm trying for my 50K badge. So for him, focused on, strength building, hypertrophy, all that kind of stuff. For me, I do go a little bit, kind of what you're talking about, Steve, on that like muscular endurance end. Like my rep range would be anywhere from 8 to 12, and I kind of stick with that like all year round. But again, you know what I mean? I am training for that kind of prolonged distance to where I don't want to burn too many matches. The volume is a lot different on the running too, right? Yeah. If you're training for, 5K, 10K, and that's only your distance, how many miles a week would you say you're probably hitting?
Well, in peak, I probably would want to hit around 70 or 80 miles a week for 10K.
Gotcha.
But I know some collegiate runners who are hitting 120.
Yeah.
Which is obnoxious.
Yeah, that's freaking crazy. Yeah.
Is that your longest distance you go, Tegan, is 10K?
In cross country, yeah, it's 10K.
Okay, so when you say mile, you're trying to maximize your ability for a mile. That when you said mile, you meant a mile, right?
Yeah, one singular mile. I'm a track guy usually, not a cross country. Well, I like cross country, but I like track more.
He dabbles.
Yeah.
He gets bored on one, he'll go to the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Fitz, you only go up to like 10 or 12 reps.
Probably, yeah. If it's a smaller muscle group, like the triceps or rear delts, I might kind of hit those a little bit higher on the 15 rep range, but I don't like to go any higher than that just because I do spend a lot of time running anyways. So again, it just kind of brings back to matches in the day. I don't want to burn too many on my strength training when I'm pretty much prioritizing my run training, if that makes sense, or my marathon training.
Yeah. And I guess you guys have to really, be pretty sophisticated about, your recovery time and mixing the two together, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, 100%. Like your protein has to be high, your carbohydrates even have to be higher. You know what I mean? Sleep definitely runs the show, and it depends too on what your protocol is during that day. Like if I have a 10-mile training run, I'm probably not going to lift on that day. You know what I mean? And that's going to be different from person to person, individual to individual, program to program. I have a rule of thumb where if it's like a 5K training run, I could probably hop off that run, hop off the treadmill, and just go straight into lift. No rest, no calories in between. If it's 10K or more, I'll probably need some calories in between. I might split it up and do a 2-a-day. So run my 10K in the morning and do my chest and tricep in the evening. Now, if it's 10 miles or more, probably, like I said, not lifting that day. That's my protocol. It differs, from athletic, professional, athlete to athlete right there.
Now, I want you guys to know that these guys are advanced runners. So what they're talking about, and if you're just starting, you're not going to be able to do this because your muscle cells are just going to get depleted. and they're not going to come back fast enough. They're not going to come back as fast as what Fitz is talking about, where he can go get some calories and get more calories in, and his body's going to go back to where it was faster. So he's going to recover much faster. That's not going to happen for someone who's older or someone who's just beginning this, because their body at the cellular level is not trained like your bodies are, right?
100%. Yeah.
So have you seen people out there who have lost a lot of weight like you, or they're older? Is that pretty common? Can people do that? People over 50, over 60 go out and run these marathons. Do you see a lot of that?
Oh, 100%. The marathon training program is going to be, a lot different versus the 5K or 10K, and just it's probably going to take, more of your time. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot more. But, at any age, any fitness level, any ability, you can run a marathon. It's just a matter of, putting the training protocol in, putting the nutrition in as well. As the old saying goes, it starts in the kitchen, ends in the gym. It's no different for running, as well. But no, I don't think you should count yourself out at any age in any distance. So from 5K all the way up to ultra marathon, from 15 years old all the way up to 85 years old, you can definitely sign up. It's just a matter of pulling the trigger. And for me, that is something I recommend. Look out for these events. Look out for these fun runs, charity events, because if you sign up for something and you pull the trigger, you're more likely to keep and stay motivated through your training program if you have an event, an end date, glooming on the horizon, so to speak. So yeah, just find a reason. You know what I mean? Pull the trigger.
Is there something that you would recommend for people that are maybe 60 is there something different that they need to do to protect their joints, or do they need more recovery time, or how does that work?
The recovery time is going to be prolonged. You know what I mean? I do believe, as you age, recovery protocol does go down. Now you can build up a tolerance, kind of like I have, to certain exercise, where you can kind of, skew that recovery protocol in the right direction. But in the beginning, it's going to take a little bit more. And for anybody over, 50 or 60, like you said, Steve, there, I'd highly recommend what we talked about earlier, is that, strength training in the gym, that resistance training, for a couple reasons. Ligament damage, BMD, bone mass density. If you hear your doctor is starting to talk to you about osteopenia, osteoporosis, probably time to go sign up with the gym and start lifting some weights. And the thing about running is, I love running, obviously, I do so much of it, but it does, lead to, and can lead to, right, atrophy of the muscles. So if you're in here doing resistance training and strength training, you're kind of combating the atrophy of the muscle. So if somebody's over 50 or 60 and they're already kind of presenting with a little bit of atrophy and they want to start running, all that much more important to be in the gym while you're doing it.
So how many calories do you guys eat a day?
Oh, dude, this is good. This is a good one, Teagues.
I actually don't count my calories.
Well, so right, if you don't, yes. And religiously, probably neither of us count our calories on a day-to-day basis. But Steve, are you talking about like maybe if we're in training program?
Yeah, I mean, how many calories do you have to eat to support what you're doing in your training program?
Right. So say your peak season cross country, you're putting it down 2 days. What are you getting at?
I mean, at my body weight, I usually try to sneak in like 3,500.
Okay, and then
3 on the low end, 4 on the high end, but 3,500 I would say on average.
So between 3,000 to 4,000 for Tegan.
Yeah.
And then what is your body weight again, give or take?
135-ish right now. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And so for me, I am about in the ballpark, you know what I mean, of 155 to 165. And I'll probably take in a little bit higher. I would say like a minimum of 3,800. And then I'll go up to, on some days, 5,000 if it's a long training day.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, I mean, that's a lot of calories, especially if you're eating clean. If you're not eating clean, anyone can eat 4,000 calories if you're eating junk. Yeah. But if you're eating clean, whole foods and quality proteins, that's
a mission. Sometimes I feel like the eating portion of it is just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the training portion of it, to be honest. And I know some people at home will listen to that and say, what, are you kidding me? I love to eat that many calories per day. But you do it, like, Steve, for, months, over time and stuff like that. It does become kind of like a mission, something you have to, laser focus in on for sure.
It feels like you're forced.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tegan.
Oh, it feels like you're force feeding yourself sometimes, depending on what you're trying to eat.
Yeah, I know what it's like. When I was doing sports in college, I had to eat 6,000 calories to maintain my weight. That's not fun.
How back in college, Steve?
Well, I was in the gym 3.5 hours a day.
So a lot more than that.
Yeah.
A lot more.
And 6 days a week. And that's not counting the running I did on the field, which was another probably 30 minutes of sprinting and stuff like that.
Super
so
high
I was
intensity.
burning a lot of calories, but my struggle was always to gain weight, to get bigger for football. And so I got up to about 185, but I felt a little sluggish. I'm a little under 5'10". I felt a little sluggish playing at that weight because I was a defensive back. So I felt my best at about 178, 180 during the season. But one of the biggest struggles was getting those calories in. And you guys nailed it on the protein. And I found it just as miserable, even more miserable, trying to hit that number every day, as opposed to trying to keep your calories under 2,000 calories. There was times where I go, man, I wish I could keep my calories under 2,000 for a month. That'd be great. So the food and what you eat is a big deal. And that was as much of a challenge for me as all the other training and so on. So how would someone start? Because running is such a good thing to add. Would they start off walking? Would they start maybe on a treadmill where it's softer? If they've never run before, and it doesn't matter if you're 20 and overweight, you can hurt yourself if you just go out there and start running, right? So how do you guys start people when they say, hey, I want to be a runner like you? What do I do?
Yeah, it depends on the person for sure. I think a good place to start, obviously, you want to know their injury history. And so you can decide if you want to start them off with running itself. Generally, if they do have previous injury history, hell, we might not even start them off with running or any impact. Like we could have them do biking, or if it's if they're really having trouble with, let's say, their knees, for example, we could have them in the pool aqua jogging. So just something to kind of increase that cardiovascular fitness initially, so that it's not going to be like a shock to their system when they do try to do that first run is important. And I think during that low impact time, we can have them strength train so that they can build up that resistance to that impact for when they actually have to go out there. Mm-hmm. Or it could just be they're already strong enough to be able to start their first run, and we kind of just have to build up their aerobic fitness from there. But it very much depends on the person.
So they could start as low as running in a pool. What are your thoughts on that, Fitz? I'm sure you train people that people see what you've done and they want you to help them do that, right? I bet you get that a lot.
Oh, 300 pounds to marathon finisher, right? And I completely agree with what Tegan says, especially with people who present, with, knee replacement, hip surgery, anything like that. Have them on the elliptical, the bicycle, you know what I mean? Because when you start running, two things will stop you. One is going to stop you before the other, and it's going to be either your legs or your heart and your lungs, your cardiovascular system, like Tegan said. So strengthening the lungs, the cardiovascular system on bike, pool, elliptical will promote and kind of, hinder stopping your running game dead in its tracks when you start, right? Because you'll have that kind of, box checked. And then like Tegan said, you can combine that protocol with a little bit of resistance training in the gym. That way, when you actually go to run, your ligaments, your joints, all that kind of stuff is kind of built up, as well as the heart and the lungs from the elliptical, the bike, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're built up enough to where you can just start running, maybe not miles at a time, but you can sustain the impact itself of jogging, then like I said in the beginning, find an event. That's one good way. Running clubs are awesome. Most cities now have, running stores, and that's a great place to look for running groups, running clubs, because they tend to have events or, weekly runs sometimes at pretty much any ability level, from beginner all the way to the super advanced. So the running club is a great way to start. The community vibe is awesome. Teamwork makes the dream work. So running clubs are good. And then the third one for me is just work cardiovascular stuff into your resistance training. So you should be, if you're in the gym already, warming up and cooling down. So if you're not, that's a good way to kind of start jogging. Maybe pick a treadmill, pick an elliptical, and then focus on doing, 10 minutes before your workout and 10 minutes after your strength workout there.
Okay, so last question for each of you. What would you say to someone, because I know running is your passion, both of you guys. What would you say to someone to just encourage them and give them a reason why, in your opinion, you think they should start running?
That's an interesting question.
I like it though. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, start running, and that is a personal thing, and for everybody I think it's going to be different, right? So I can only speak for myself in that regard as to why I like running and it's my passion. And for me, there's something just to be said about and call it what you want, but being your own engine, propelling yourself through the world and just enjoying being outside, enjoying nature. For me, it's almost as much of a mental benefit as much as a physical benefit, right? So I just love the feeling of going out and being able to run down the street pain-free and knowing that I'm doing this on my own accord. I'm doing this with my own 2 feet, right? So if you haven't experienced that sensation, I think definitely want to try it for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I've heard a lot of people say that, those endorphins are being released and you it's almost like an addiction, how you feel when you get into that zone.
I mean, you hear about the runner's high, right? There's a reason why that's, a terminology. It's like you said, the endorphins are released. You feel great. You know what I mean? After a good jog, a good run,
And so, Tegan, just to kind of go back to you real quick. So you just said you tried it and you just liked it and you found that you were good at it.
Yeah.
But
I think
did you have a feeling you would be good at it before you tried it, or did you just try it and you go, wow, I'm good at this? Did that surprise you?
To be honest, I think it was a little vain of me at the time because I thought it would, it would make me like popular. That's why I started. I'm gonna be like completely honest there. It wasn't like any deep-seated aspiration to help anybody. It was because I thought I would be good at it and it would be cool to look good. So, I mean, obviously, as time goes on, you learn to love the process behind it. But that was definitely not what I was thinking. Because, I mean, I was like 10 at the time, it's not like I was seeing into the future and being like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be awesome at this. It was definitely a little bit of an ego thing, I think, when I first did it.
Okay, so you'd say you got into it for one reason, but then you found out you liked it for another reason. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. Yeah.
That's cool. So all you people out there listening, you might try it and think you're not going to like it or doing it for one reason, but you might find out you do like it and you want to incorporate more. So appreciate both you guys and your input on this. If you have any last thoughts, let me know, and then we'll close it out.
No, thanks for having us, Steve. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I got one last thought to like, if you're trying to get into running, I think Fitz touched on it a little bit earlier with going to the clubs and stuff. Find a really good support group who's going to help you, because that's a really big entry to barriers, kind of just getting out the door. So if you can have anyone that is going to be like, hey, wake up, we're going for a run right now, that's going to be incredibly helpful for your training. And not only that, but if you're doing all your runs by yourself, it gets incredibly boring. I know from experience. So having people who can run with you and talk to you and either help slow you down when you need to on your easy days or help push the pace on your hard days is probably one of the most important things when it actually comes to training. So find a really good support system of people who will help build you up during the process.
That's a last little bit of great advice, because you know what, guys, that works with everything. If you're in the gym and you're doing squats or powerlifting or whatever, get a workout partner, because it's that accountability. or a group even better. You know, you don't want to let them down and they don't want to let you down. And it just has that built-in accountability aspect. So that's great advice there at the end, Tegan. So thanks for being with us, guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Steve. Big love.